So it's 5 o'clock South African time, 4 o'clock UK time, and this is the time that Dave and I get together and we just keep doing this conversation. And we're talking about wisdom. But the truth is, we're talking about a whole lot of things: wisdom, principles. It's basically what comes to mind as we talk. But we're going to carry on just a little bit where we left off yesterday. So yesterday we spoke about how the world has changed, and if we think about we're in this lockdown situation, and there's a couple of people that we're living very very close and intimate with, and then there's a whole greater world outside that we're not able to supervise and manage and do things like we used to. And we just mentioned that this could be quite a good thing. It could help us develop trust in people who are out there. But Dave, you then posed that very interesting question. You said, "But what about the people that we're in?" It's almost like we're playing two different games. The one game is like a game of cricket, and the other game is like a game of rugby, or whatever we want to call it. And they both require very very different thought processes, or so we think.
I think the big thing about this time is I would say the word intentionality. We have to be intentional about building relationships externally, i.e. via video. And also we've got to be very intentional about how we're going to be dealing with our relationships internally, as in stuck within these four walls. I think because, as life used to be in the past, there was times for us to be able to escape and go out and do different things. And there was lots of other distractions going on. But here we are in lockdown, and we're living with the same people in their space constantly now for 5, 6, 8, 10 weeks, who knows how long that is. And I think there are these two. We've got to be intentional about how we reach out, but we've got to be intentional about how we actually manage these relationships. I was listening to the news the other day, and in one city alone, there were 400 cases of domestic violence the police had to turn up to here in the UK. That was just in a week, 1 week, 400 cases of domestic violence in one city. And they're talking about how the divorce rate is going to go through the roof, when people can get out of this thing, and domestic violence is an issue. And it just got me thinking, Mike, how do we foster good relationships, and how do we be intentional with our loved ones, with our family, during this time of lockdown? How do we communicate? Now, something you've always said to me, which I think would be good for you to unpack, is I need to sometimes just touch base with Mandy, or touch base with my kids, and I just need to find out how they are. So unpack that for people that are not used to necessarily touching base. What does that look like? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and Dave, just as you were chatting there, it's we often think of home as a sanctuary for we go to work and then we go back to our sanctuary, and home is you've heard me talk about Tuscany, and the Tuscany on the stage, and that's something we can talk about sometime. But it's that awareness that for some people home is not the sanctuary. Work is the sanctuary. Work is where they potentially get away from lots and lots of tension. And I don't know if we can sort of imagine. I think you and I are just in a very blessed situation that we get on well with our spouses. We get on well with you with Matt, and I'm with my sister-in-law and her husband, and we get on well with each other. In actual fact, a highlight of the day is getting together for dinner, where we just sort of unpack and just imagine being confined with outside of your sanctuary. So I suppose, as we tackle this question, we've got to realize that there's the reasonable home that's going to go through the reasonable challenges, and then there's the home where it's a different, it's dysfunctional. And so if we're talking the reasonable home, I think a word that is one of my favorite words, and it's just the word grace. And it's the application of grace to yourself, and it's the application of grace to the people that you're living with. I think it's impossible to think that you're going to go through 28 or 35 days of lockdown and not feel an element of tension or not have moments where people are having a bad hair day. And the ability to be generous to your partner or somebody else that you're with, and saying it's okay,
Yeah.
okay,
You're giving grace.
yeah, you're giving your most generous interpretation to a set of events. Now, obviously, if somebody's every day waking up into that bad space, we're probably moving more over to maybe not dysfunctional, but to really, really tense situations. But I know that I've had 1 or 2 days where I've woken up and it's like, oh, I really don't want to be here. And even grace to yourself. So I love what Liz Gilbert says. She says, speak to yourself the way that you speak to somebody that you love. And I think there's a whole lot of other people who have said something similar to that, but just that self-love. But grace to self, grace to other people, and to probably more often use these words, it's okay.
I think I resonate 100% with what you're saying, Mike. I think what we need to do is also vocabulary, finding the right words, and helping people find the right words unlocks the ability to communicate. Now, you and I, we're good at words. We talk about stuff easily, but that's not true for everyone that we're in relationship with. My wife is an introvert. I'm an extrovert. And so when you ask someone, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Not everyone has a vast amount of words or even the immediate insight to be able to explain that or unpack that, I think one of the things we can do better at is to start to expand our vocabulary and give some suggestions of words. One of the questions that we ask in our family a lot is, how is your energy level today? Are you in a high energy or a low energy day? Then that's quite a nice, easy way for someone to gauge where they're at, or another one is, what's your resonance today? How are you resonating? There's slightly different words to feelings. Sometimes people don't know readily how to put feelings to words, but they could perhaps say, well, I'm having a low energy day today, or a higher energy day today. So I definitely think in our communicating with one another to allow different vocabulary to arise. Have different words, create your own vocabulary amongst one another. Kerry and I have got these key words that we can say to one another, which have a great meaning to us and very little meaning to everyone else, And I remember I said in another previous podcast that the route to patience is understanding. And the more you can gain understanding of somebody's state of being, mind, energy level, emotion, the natural effect is patience, which is, in your word, grace. You find grace for one another. Would you agree?
Yeah, I love it. And I love the fact that you're talking about to create vocabulary, a language that you can talk to each other. And I think it's essential. Yes, so do I know enough about you today? Let me not assume that where you were yesterday is where you are today. And I just so resonate with what you're saying. Sometimes when we start workshops, we go around the circle and it would be saying to people, what is something about you that I need to know that in knowing helps me as a facilitator?
Say that again slowly, Mike. That was really good.
So what is something about you today that I need to know that helps me as a facilitator in engaging with you? So for example, you spoke yesterday or the day before about situational leadership. And the truth is that every single day you and I have a context which could be different to yesterday.
Yes.
Now, right now we're in the same setting, but I could have got a phone call that was disturbing. I could have just woken up, and the emotions are all over the place. So if you're in a workshop with somebody, so they might, for example, respond and say, I rode over my dog today. And, the response would be, well, thanks for sharing that with us. Let me take that into consideration as I'm dealing with you. Oh, by the way, if you need to leave the room and phone the vet.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think this was actually something that I was in a workshop many years ago where they talked about this company. They all actually get together at the beginning of the day. Obviously, it's a fairly small company, and they did check-in. And check-in was exactly that, to explain to everyone where they are at that moment. Now, obviously, for introverts, it's probably a very frightening concept to open up where they are. But what it did is they said that it provided a level of insight from everyone to everyone that provided the grace, and you could get more out of people, and you didn't assume, or take offense, because it's very easy to get offended because someone was quite short with you if you didn't understand why they're being short with you, And I think that's quite key when you're in shutdown with one another.
Yeah, and another way of adding to that would be give it a score. So out of 1 to 10, where are you today? And 10, this is best day of my life. Versus the next day it could be 2. And people don't necessarily need to explain their score, but it could just be, hey, I'm a bit fragile today.
Yeah,
I'm not too sure what's going on inside. There's stuff rumbling here, and I think that's probably the secret to this as well. Is it's not to place judgment. If you turn around and say, well, how can you be a 5? You come on, don't you know we have family that's 8s and stuff like that. The person's never going to share a score again. So, and here's probably a really, really big thing, especially for us guys. If your wife says, I'm a 2 today, I'm a little bit fragile, don't try and solve the problem.
No, so yeah, you're speaking my language. This is the word of empathy that I used the other day, right? So empathy is putting yourself in the other person's perspective and removing the need to judge. I can probably, we're probably triggering many conversations in houses today. How can you be a 5? You've been a 5 for the last week. Can't you be a 5.5? What's the matter with you? Yeah. Someone said to me that this must be an introvert's worst nightmare, being kept in a home with a bunch of extroverts, with nowhere to go. So.
And yet, having said that, Davey, so introverts, and sure, we could go totally off track here, but introverts also need space. So introverts might need quietness, but I'm a more introverted personality, but I love openness. I love space. I want to sit in different places, and I don't want you to bug me, but I want to be in openness and space, and so, extrovert and introvert, their place of openness is what's so often very, very needed. But yeah, the score thing can really help because it just encourages people, and it's just so good that we know that about each other. And like I say, don't try and solve it. Another question maybe ask each other when you're living with people can be the question, what does support look like for you? So say Kerry says, I'm a 3. And then you look at her and say, okay, thanks for sharing that. That's quite low. You don't need to try and expand it. But what does support look like for you today from me? And her response might be, Dave, just give me space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't talk to me.
And it's a lovely, sure, interrogative might be the wrong word, but it's a transformational question. What does support look like for you?
Yeah. And what are your needs? I think it's interesting when we talk communication. We talk about, you'll be familiar, I'm sure, with the 5 love languages, and so again, it helps us unpack and saying, what are your needs today? Is it a hug that you need? Is it a word of affirmation? Is it an act of service? Is it a gift? Is it quality time? I think these are actually very good opportunities in a lockdown to have those conversations. One of the conversations that we have, and we encourage couples to have, is when you feel the most loved, what is it that's happening at that moment? Is it just sitting on the sofa watching a TV program? Is it having your back rubbed, or is it having a gift, or what is it? And I think these kind of questions at this time, Mike, probably will unlock and strengthen relationships. It would be wonderful to think that people come out of lockdown in a stronger place than they went in, right? Because they're making the most of the time, which speaks to intentionality that we spoke about.
Yeah. And so, hopefully, again, if we're assuming the sort of reasonable household where there isn't undue stress, but hopefully in years to come, we will look back on lockdown and we might even long for it. Say, hey, remember those special moments where we had dinner every night without fail at 6:30, and it was around the table. Remember those times where you didn't have to fly
at 4:00 every afternoon.
Because you know the beautiful thing is, you know, so my travel started to slow down even about 7, 8, 9 days before lockdown. I haven't been at the airport or on a plane for like 40 odd days.
Mm.
It's probably the longest stretch, 40 days in a row, that I've been with Mandy in,
Yeah,
I don't know, 10 years,
yeah.
because there's always sort of traveling in. So yeah, but yeah, you know, I suppose the big thing that I'm getting out of this is that it's your word, intentionality. There is a little bit of work that you need to do to really make the dance work.
Mm.
And sometimes it's the application of grace. Sometimes it's what's the one thing I need to know about you right now?
Mm.
Uh, what does support look like? The love languages. What's the need that I'm going to address?
Mm.
So all of that, I suppose, takes desire.
Mm.
Do we have the desire to walk strong with the people that we're with?
Ah, beautiful. I love your picture of a dance, because that's your relationships are a dance, you know. And you know, we look at some of the most graceful people dancing the tango, whatever it is. Actually, that comes from hours of practice,
Mm,
hours of stepping on people's toes, of one another's toes, and you know, all of those things. But slowly over time, you learn to dance, and you learn to dance more intuitively, without thinking. You know, you enter into a dance. What a beautiful thought. May we this over this weekend learn how to dance with those that we are in close
mm,
proximity with. You know, may
yeah,
may our levels of communication be deeper and stronger and more meaningful, over the next few days. Yeah, I think that would be a great goal.
yeah. And sometimes we're doing the tango with each other, but don't assume that therefore you're doing the tango tomorrow. It might be the waltz,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and then it might be the real slow dance. Just yeah. So it's about desire, and it's about the adventure. But yeah, if I could say one thing again, and it's about grace
Mm,
towards self, grace towards each other. We are going to have those moments where we say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing.
mm,
Be generous in your interpretation to yourself and towards others.
mm. Beautiful. Let's leave it there, Mike. I think that's great. And to all those who are listening in, grace and peace, and look forward to speaking to you guys soon.